They called them the ghost soldiers. The Viet Cong feared them more than American bombers, more than napalm, more than the jungle itself. Phuoc Thu Province, South Vietnam, March 17, 1966, 3:42 a.m. Sergeant Jim Campbell lay in a drainage ditch 50 meters from a Viet Cong base camp. The water was scum green and warm. It smelled like rotting vegetation and human waste. Leeches found the gaps in his uniform within minutes. Campbell had been watching the camp for 6 hours. He knew the sentry rotation. He knew which fighters snored. He knew where they kept their ammunition. Understanding them, that was the mission. His team moved at 3:42 a.m. The Viet Cong sentry never heard them coming. A gloved hand covered his mouth. He felt the blade before he understood what was happening. His war ended in absolute silence. 3 other sentries died the same way within 90 seconds. By 4:00 a.m., the base camp ceased to exist. 18 fighters, 2 weapons caches, 1 communications relay, gone. By 4:30 a.m., Campbell's team had vanished back into the jungle. They left only bodies arranged in patterns that sent a message. In Hanoi, Viet Cong intelligence officers would spend the next 3 years trying to answer one question. How do you fight an enemy who understands you better than you understand yourself? January 1966. Jim Campbell stepped off the transport at Phuoc Thu Province. The heat hit him first, then the smell, aviation fuel, red dust, and something organic he'd learned to identify as jungle rot. He'd survived selection courses with 90% failure rates, trained in the Malayan emergency tradition. 12 years of lessons written in jungle blood, but American commanders were skeptical. Major General William Westmoreland had reviewed Allied contributions in 1964. The British offer expertise in counterinsurgency. Whether their methods suit our operational tempo remains to be seen. The Americans had firepower. Huey helicopters, B-50, 2 bombers, artillery on demand. Campbell's squadron brought something different, understanding. British SAS Major Peter Walsh explained the philosophical divide. The Americans wanted to find the enemy and destroy him with maximum force. We wanted to understand him first, then remove him surgically. Campbell's first briefing made the mission clear. His 4-man patrol would operate differently than any American unit in Vietnam. No radio chatter, no helicopter insertions near targets, no body count quotas, just observation, intelligence, patience. In March, Campbell's patrol inserted on foot, walking 18 kilometers through jungle to avoid helicopter noise. 4 men, minimal equipment, 2 weeks of rations. Their mission, observe a suspected Viet Cong supply route. For 6 days, they watched. Campbell documented everything: times of movement, number of fighters, direction of travel, rest patterns. The Viet Cong moved at dusk, always in groups of 8 to 12. They stopped at the same creek junction every time. 15-minute breaks. Predictable. On day 7, Campbell radioed the intelligence. Australian artillery struck the creek junction at dusk. 14 Viet Cong killed. The supply route closed. Campbell's patrol never fired a shot. 14 enemy eliminated through patience alone. Commander Tran Van Tra stared at the casualty reports on his desk. 20 years of fighting the French, then the Americans. He'd never felt this. Uncertainty in his own territory. New enemy units had arrived in Phuoc Thu Province, Australian forces, small numbers compared to the American divisions. His officers had dismissed them. More foreigners playing soldier in our jungle. But Tran was more cautious. The reports mentioned unusual tactics, long patrols, no contact, strange disappearances. The Americans were predictable. Helicopters announced their arrival from kilometers away. Infantry units moved in platoons, impossible to hide, easy to avoid, ambush, outlast. If these Australians fought like Americans, they'd be no different. By May, Tran knew he'd been wrong. Small outposts were disappearing, not overrun, just gone. Sentries found dead with knife wounds. Supply routes interdicted with impossible timing. No helicopter sounds. No artillery preparation. No infantry sweeps. Just silence, then death, then nothing. His field commanders reported something new: fear. Fighters spoke of shadows in the jungle, units that appeared and vanished like smoke. One veteran officer, a man who'd survived 10 years of combat, refused to patrol certain areas. Tran ordered increased security, double sentries, random patrol schedules, no fires at night. He ordered it, knowing it wouldn't be enough. The casualties continued. Someone was watching them, learning their patterns, predicting their movements. For the first time in 20 years of fighting, Tran felt hunted in his own jungle. Campbell's patrol received their most challenging mission yet. Track a Viet Cong unit. Don't engage, just observe and report. For 5 days, Campbell's team shadowed 20 Viet Cong fighters through Phuoc Tuy province, reading bent grass, following disturbed leaves, tracking barely visible footprints. Campbell learned their rest schedule, their security protocols, their rally points, their command structure. He learned which commander was cautious, which was aggressive, which made decisions by committee. Lieutenant John White led a separate patrol that confirmed the enemy's base camp location. On day 5, they called in the coordinates. The coordinated strike killed 17 Viet Cong, including 2 senior commanders. According to patrol accounts, survivors found notes written in Vietnamese at the ambush site. "We've been watching you." Campbell had turned observation into psychological warfare. The Viet Cong weren't just losing fighters, they were losing confidence. More importantly, they were changing behavior, becoming cautious, defensive, paranoid, exactly what Campbell wanted. Tran read the September 1966 security directive 3 times before signing it. Unknown enemy forces, possibly elite American or foreign troops, have established presence in our base areas. They employ unusual tactics. Avoid engagement if possible. Report all unusual jungle signs immediately. He was issuing orders to avoid contact, defensive orders, in territory his forces had controlled for years. The humiliation burned. His commanders implemented new protocols. No regular trails, camp relocations every 3 days, buddy systems for all movement. The operational efficiency degraded immediately. Units spent half their time on security instead of planning operations. Tran slammed his fist on the map table. Exactly what the enemy wanted. These ghost soldiers weren't trying to destroy his forces. They were trying to make them ineffective. They understood psychological warfare better than any American unit. They understood that paranoid enemies make mistakes. They understood that fear was a weapon. They understood the Viet Cong. One of Tran's officers reported finding a base camp that had been observed for days before the attack. They knew our rally point, our secondary rally point, our emergency extraction route. They knew everything. Tran finally understood the full scope of what he faced. These weren't just elite soldiers hunting as fighters. They were intelligence specialists who'd studied Viet Cong doctrines so thoroughly they could predict decisions before commanders made them. And that understanding was winning the war. Campbell studied the changed Viet Cong behavior. They'd stopped using regular trails, doubled their sentries, relocated camps every 3 days. Good tactical adjustments, but predictable ones. Captain Ron Large briefed Campbell's squadron on their evolution. "We're not trying to kill every Viet Cong. We're trying to make them ineffective. They're spending half their energy on security. That means they can't spend it planning operations." Campbell developed step-up tactics. His patrol would ambush a Viet Cong unit on a trail, then immediately reposition to the logical retreat route. The fleeing Viet Cong would run straight into a second ambush. Survivors would find a third team waiting at their rally point. Sergeant Dave Curtin ran the first step-up operation in October 1966, 3 consecutive ambushes in 40 minutes. The Viet Cong unit surrendered rather than keep running. The survivors raised their hands at the third ambush. Campbell would read Tran's report later. The Viet Cong commander couldn't believe it. His fighters, men who'd endured years of American bombing, surrendering to 4 men in the jungle. The ghost soldiers weren't just killing Tran's troops, they were breaking them. Campbell had weaponized their training against them. Tran convened his commanders. The casualties were manageable. 50 fighters in 6 months, acceptable losses by any measure. But the psychological damage was catastrophic. One of his best officers sat across from him, hands shaking as he described the triple ambush. "They knew our rally point, our secondary rally point, our emergency extraction route. They knew everything." The officer had lost his entire unit. The survivors were traumatized, broken. Tran felt rage building, 20 years of warfare, and he was watching his forces degrade, not from firepower, but from fear. He slammed his fist on the table. "We adapt, deploy decoy camps with obvious security flaws, position reaction forces around suspected observation posts, create hunter-killer teams to track the trackers." His senior commander looked skeptical. "And if they see through the decoys, then we learn what they do when they know it's a trap," Tran said. The words sounded hollow even to him. He was implementing countermeasures against an enemy he'd never seen. The humiliation was worse than the casualties. But doing nothing meant accepting defeat. Campbell encountered his first decoy camp. Too obvious. Sentries positioned badly. Weapons stacked carelessly. Fresh footprints leading away in 3 directions. A trap. He called it in and withdrew. Australian intelligence analyzed the tactic. The Viet Cong were adapting, learning, trying to turn observation against the observers. Good. That meant Campbell's methods were working. The British SAS advisors introduced new techniques from their Borneo operations. Claret operations. Unauthorized cross-border raids that officially never happened. Campbell's team crossed into Cambodia in December 1966. They hit a Viet Cong sanctuary camp, destroyed supply caches, photographed documents, faded back into Vietnam before anyone could respond. The Viet Cong had thought sanctuaries meant safety. Campbell proved there were no safe spaces. Understanding meant knowing where the enemy felt secure, then violating that security. Geography couldn't protect them. Borders couldn't protect them. Nothing could protect them from an enemy who understood their thinking. Tran received reports of attacks in Cambodia. Impossible. The border was sacrosanct. The Americans respected it. International law, political constraints, rules of engagement, the things that protected his sanctuary bases. These weren't Americans. The ghost soldiers operated by different rules. No political constraints, no prohibited zones, no sanctuary. Tran's hands trembled as he read the after-action reports. His commanders whispered that these forces could cross any border, attack any target, appear anywhere. The decoy camps had caught nothing. The hunter-killer teams found no one. The reaction forces arrived to empty jungle. The enemy understood Viet Cong tactical thinking too well. They anticipated responses before Tran's commanders issued orders. He stared at the map of Phuoc Tuy province. Red circles marked areas where his forces had taken casualties. Blue circles marked successful enemy operations. The map was more blue than red. Tran made the hardest decision of his military career. Certain areas would be abandoned. Northern Phuoc Tuy province. The cost of operating there exceeded any strategic benefit. Better to preserve forces than lose them to an enemy who couldn't be found. His staff officers protested. "We've held this territory for years. We can't just, we're ceding territory," Tran said, his voice flat. Not because of military defeat, because of psychological exhaustion. For the first time since the French War, he was retreating from land his forces controlled. The ghost soldiers had won without fighting. Campbell noticed the change. Viet Cong activity in northern Phuoc Tuy province dropped to 0. Camps abandoned, trails unused, no contact for weeks. They'd won without fighting, the highest form of warfare, according to Sun Tzu. American units began requesting SAS training. The U.S. Military Assistance Command Vietnam established courses where Campbell taught American long-range reconnaissance patrol units. Campbell stood before 30 American soldiers. "Forget everything you know about patrols," he said. "You're not infantry anymore. You're hunters. Move slower, observe more, shoot less." The Americans struggled with the concept. Their entire training emphasized aggression, speed, firepower, closing with and destroying the enemy. Campbell taught patience. Watch the enemy for 3 days before you touch him. Learn his patterns. Understand his thinking. Then strike when he's most vulnerable. Some adapted quickly. MACV SOG operators especially. Staff Sergeant Billy Waugh approached Campbell after training. "You've changed how we fight this war," Waugh said. "Silence is a weapon. Patience is a weapon. 4 quiet men accomplish what a platoon with air support can't." Campbell's methods were spreading. Tran prepared for major operations. Hanoi was planning something significant, a coordinated offensive across South Vietnam. The Tet holiday, early 1968. Finally, something that might change the war. The offensive required months of preparation, troop movements, supply stockpiling, coordination with northern units, all of which created patterns. Tran knew the risk. If the ghost soldiers were watching, they'd see the buildup. They always saw everything. He ordered maximum operational security, compartmentalized planning, false radio traffic, decoy movements. He issued strict orders to avoid contact with Australian units during preparation. No engagements, no alerts, nothing that would draw attention. The offensive's success depended on surprise. But as Tran studied the operation plans, doubt gnawed at him. How do you surprise an enemy who understands you better than you understand yourself? Campbell's patrol reported unusual activity, increased Viet Cong movement in supposedly abandoned areas, supply caches being established, unit movements at night. radio traffic patterns changing. Something was building. Campbell compiled 6 weeks of observations. Movement patterns, supply routes, troop concentrations, coordination indicators. Australian intelligence analyzed the data. Major offensive preparation, time frame, early 1968. Target, multiple locations simultaneously. Campbell's report went to Australian Task Force headquarters. The warning was clear. A massive attack was coming. They had weeks to prepare. While American bases elsewhere remained unaware, Campbell's patient observation had revealed the enemy's intentions. Foreknowledge from understanding. Campbell's patrol occupied defensive positions around the Australian Task Force base at Nui Dat. They'd been there for 3 days, waiting. His 6 weeks of intelligence had been precise. Attack timeline, Tet holiday. Target, multiple bases simultaneously. Method, coordinated assault to create maximum shock. The Australian Task Force prepared accordingly. Defensive positions reinforced. Artillery pre-registered on likely approach routes. Infantry on full alert. Across South Vietnam, American bases settled in for the Tet holiday. They had no idea what was coming. Trans units moved into assault positions at 2:00 a.m. Months of preparation, perfect coordination, complete surprise, except at the Australian base. His forward scouts reported something wrong. No lights in the base, no normal activity. Defensive positions that hadn't been there 2 days ago. Artillery already ranged on their approach routes. They were expected. Tran's stomach dropped. Impossible. Operational security had been absolute. Compartmentalized planning. No radio traffic. Maximum deception. How did they know? The attack proceeded anyway. Orders from Hanoi couldn't be changed. Tran's forces advanced into a prepared defense. Campbell watched the Viet Cong approach through night vision. Exactly where his intelligence predicted. Exactly when he'd forecasted. He'd seen the pattern 6 weeks ago. Supply movements, coordination signals, staging area preparation. Australian artillery opened fire at 2:47 a.m. Pre-registered coordinates. No adjustment needed. Perfect accuracy. Campbell watched a Viet Cong assault team advance through the wire. They moved with discipline, covering each other. Professional soldiers executing their training. They never had a chance. Australian machine guns opened up from positions Campbell had recommended based on his terrain analysis. The Viet Cong team disappeared in a storm of tracer fire. More teams followed. Same result. Trans fighters were advancing into a defense built on 6 weeks of understanding their doctrine. By 4:00 a.m., the assault was over. 23 Viet Cong dead on the wire. Australian casualties. 2 wounded. At Khe Sanh, American Marines fought for their lives against a siege that would last 77 days. At Hue, house-to-house combat raged for weeks. The ancient imperial city burned. At the U.S. Embassy in Saigon, Viet Cong sappers breached the walls. Cameras captured American military police fighting in the courtyard. At Nui Dat, Australian gunners drank tea while counting bodies on the wire. Same offensive, different results. The difference was 6 weeks of patience. Tran reviewed the catastrophic results. Every attack across South Vietnam had achieved tactical surprise. Khe Sanh besieged, Hue occupied, Saigon's embassy breached. Every attack except Phuoc Tuy province. The Australians had been waiting, ready, positioned perfectly. His casualties at Nui Dat were severe. The offensive there had failed completely. While American bases suffered shock and damage, the Australians had turned the attack into a slaughter. Someone had known. Tran stared at the map. The ghost soldiers had seen through months of deception. They'd studied his doctrine so thoroughly, they'd predicted the offensive before he'd finalized the plans. Fighting Americans meant fighting superior firepower. You could survive that with tunnels, patience, and willpower. Fighting the SAS meant fighting an enemy who understood you better than you understood yourself. There was no defense against that. Campbell's squadron rotated home in March 1968. 600 SAS operators had rotated through Vietnam over 2 years. 3 had died in combat. Several dozen wounded. They'd inflicted an estimated 500 or more confirmed enemy killed, intelligence leading to thousands more casualties. But the numbers missed the point. A captured North Vietnamese officer's interrogation revealed the real impact. If you see them, don't engage. Report, position, and withdraw. They always have support nearby, and they never lose. The perception mattered more than reality. SAS patrols could be overwhelmed by superior numbers. Campbell knew that. They were highly trained soldiers, not superhuman. But the Viet Cong genuinely believed engaging an SAS patrol was suicide, fear based on understanding. By 1969, areas of Phuoc Tuy province were effectively Viet Cong free. Not because of major operations, because the Viet Cong simply abandoned them. They couldn't move safely, couldn't rest securely, couldn't plan effectively. The cost exceeded any strategic benefit. Campbell had proven something the Americans never fully grasped. Superior firepower kills enemy soldiers. Superior understanding defeats enemy strategy. Campbell's war was over, but the lesson remained. Campbell returned to Australia in 1972. His war had proven something the Pentagon spent years trying to understand. The Americans brought overwhelming firepower to Vietnam. B-52 bombers, artillery barrages, search and destroy operations. They killed hundreds of thousands of enemy soldiers and lost the war. Campbell's 600 SAS operators brought patient observation, intelligence gathering, tactical restraint. They studied the enemy until they could predict his movements, anticipate his decisions, exploit his patterns. They defeated him psychologically before engaging him physically. In 2003, Campbell gave his only interview about Vietnam. The reporter asked what made the SAS different. Campbell's answer was simple. We weren't better soldiers than the Americans. We just understood the jungle better than the men who'd lived in it their whole lives. Once you understand your enemy that completely, the fighting becomes almost unnecessary. They defeat themselves. 30 years later, Special Operations Forces worldwide still study Campbell's patrols, not for the tactics, for what he understood that others didn't. The enemy's doctrine, the enemy's thinking, the enemy's fears. The Viet Cong feared the SAS, not because of their weapons. They feared them because the SAS understood jungle warfare better than the men who'd invented it. Understanding turned the hunters into the hunted. The War Maestro Chronicles. The questions history won't answer. An entire army ordered to flee from four-man patrols. Why? They weren't being hunted. They were being understood. The Americans killed hundreds of thousands. Lost. The SAS understood the enemy. Won. Subscribe for stories where the lesson came too late. Thanks for watching.